All right, everybody, we're going to talk about discussion boards within Blackboard today. I'm going to go into my training course so we can actually look at a discussion board. But basically, discussion boards are a really great tool for asynchronous learning that allow you to set up some parameters, but really allow students to be able to interact and engage with each other without being in the physical classroom or over Zoom or meeting. So the first thing I want to do is actually create a link over here on the left-hand side to your discussion board. So to do that, we're going to go up to the plus icon. You're going to look for tool link. You're going to give your discussion board a name. So this could be discussion board. You can see I've got an autofill. It could be discussions. It could be class discussion, whatever you want that to be named. Then the next thing, and this is really important, is that under type, you need to find discussion board as the type. That'll basically create the link, and then you can decide whether or not it'll be available to users. And I'm going to make it available. So you can see it added it down here. Like anything else in the navigation, you can use the little arrows on the left-hand side to actually move it wherever you want it to be. And so I've already got a discussion board link, so I just added another one. So let's go ahead and click on the link we just created. So this page that you see here actually gives you kind of the discussion board dashboard, and you can see any of the forums that have been created, the descriptions, the total posts, unread posts. Basically, this is showing unread posts that are unread to you as a user. Then there's unread replies. So if someone's replied to you directly, it'll actually give you a number here. So that's both as instructor and students. And then it'll also tell you the total number of participants as well. So it'll give you kind of an overview of what is unread and what's also been posted as well. If something's unread in here, it'll actually show up as bolded. So it's easy to visually see the name will be bolded. And from there, you can really, in terms of kind of organizing your discussion board, you can really do this any way you want. So what you could do is you want to create forums for each week of your course. So you have week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Or maybe you have certain weeks that you have homework assignments that are discussion boards, and each of those would be a forum. So if there's a homework assignment in week 2, maybe week 5 and week 8, you would have maybe 3 different forums in here, one that's week 2, one that's week 5, and one that's week 8. So you can really organize kind of however you want that makes sense for you. And if it's helpful to think about it, the discussion board is kind of the bigger place that houses the forums. And then within a forum, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but you can create individual threads. And most of the time, individual threads are the individual students or even your post if you're participating in a discussion as the instructor. So let's jump in and we'll create a forum. So to that, you're going to go up to the left and click Create Forum. And we're going to give the forum a name. So I'm just going to call this one Chapter 5 Assignment. And then within the description, you're going to want to put the prompt. So maybe the prompt is, please answer the questions at the end of chapter 5. And then you also want to include if there's any part of the assignment, which likely there is because you're using a discussion board, but if there's any part of the assignment that's encouraging them to reply to others. So you would say reply to 2 other students posts, or just reply to 2 other students. Basically just making sure that it's clear what your expectations are of them. All right, so then we're going to scroll down under form availability, get the same or similar similar availability that we see on most Blackboard items. You can say whether it's available, yes or no, and then you can use these display after, display until to basically schedule your content and when it's available. So then next we're going to move down to forum settings. And basically what you can do here is set a bunch of different things in terms of how you use your discussion board. So the first one is really important, this viewing threads or replies. If you have it set as standard view, this means that students can go in and review and see other students' posts before they post. But if you choose this, participants must create a thread in order to view other threads in this forum. That basically means that anyone else can't see what other students have written or shared. before they post. So for instance, if you have something that's maybe the student comments or student posts are going to be pretty unique, you might not need to turn this on. But if you have a situation where students' comments might depend on one another, as in they might be related, you might want to turn that on. So the next thing is grading. So if you do want to grade your discussion boards, this is where you would turn it on. And we'd recommend almost always turning on grade discussion forum, because that will allow you to grade the entire forum as opposed to grading threads, which will actually have you grade each individual thread one at a time. So it's not as great of an experience for you as the instructor because it doesn't bring everything together. Whereas grade discussion forum will actually allow you to bring all of your content together from one student. So if they've posted in a thread, if they've replied to another student's thread, all of that will be brought together. So I'm going to make this out of 5. This can be, whatever points you want. This is just basically going to allow you to see that the students' posts are going into needs grading. And then you would set a due date, especially if this is graded, or even if it's not. I think it just makes sense to add a due date so that students are aware of when they need to complete this by. So then if we keep scrolling down, you can turn on subscriptions. Basically, this allows individuals to set whether or not they want to subscribe to the discussion board or to the forum. Or even to the thread rather. And this is just a way to allow people to stay kind of on top of their notifications. So then the next part here, the create and edit section, you can see these first 3 options are actually 4 options are grayed out by default. But basically, if this is all dependent upon this viewing threads and replies option that we set earlier. So if I switch back to standard view, you can see that now I've got these options again. And I would say too, if you do standard view, make sure that this allow members to create new threads is turned on, this option here, because otherwise students won't be able to create their own threads and they will have to, they can only reply to instructor created threads. So I'm going to go back and just turn my participants must create a thread in order to view the other threads in this forum on. Then the only other options here, so forced moderation of posts is something I probably wouldn't recommend using all that often, if at all. Basically, it forces you to moderate and review any posts that are set before they are able to be viewed publicly. And then the last 2 options don't come up all that often, but it are helpful to know. Basically, that first one, allow post tagging. You can put a keyword or keywords on posts to basically tag them and reference them later on. And then the second one, allow members to rate posts, allows individual students to kind of give ratings to a thread or through a post. All right, so I'm gonna just quickly go through kind of the most important things. So definitely a name, definitely a description, the availability, choosing whether or not it's, what type of viewing you want to do, if it's graded, and the due date. The rest of the stuff here really is probably fine by default. So just in case, it's helpful to know. All right, so I'm going to click submit. You can give it a second. And you can see now, like with everything on Blackboard, the newest item goes to the bottom. But again, you can move this just by hovering over the left-hand item here where the arrows are and just dragging. So from here, we're actually going to click into this new form that we just created. So chapter 5 assignment. And you can see now there's nothing here. So what we'll do first is create a thread. So this is what students would do. They'd come in here, they'd create their thread, and they'd say Emma's response to chapter 5. And then I'm going to go in and put my response. And from here, I can also attach a file if I really needed to, if it was kind of additional supporting elements or something referenced. But for the most part, in order to get the best experience of the discussion boards, the majority of the content should really be in this message box. So then I'm going to hit submit. And now you can see in this forum, there's one thread and it's the one I just created. So most of the time, you're just going to probably be fine with having individual students create their own threads and then having other students go in and reply. And I'll show you how to do that. So if I came back in here into this chapter 5 assignment, I click on this, the thread name, and I click reply, I can then add my reply. And again, you get the file options as well. And I'll click submit. So now you can see there's the response to the initial post, the initial prompt, and then there's the reply. And then the OK down the bottom right will always take you back to the forum that you're in. So that'll kind of help you. And then from the forum page, it can actually hit OK again, and it'll take you back to the discussion board page. All right, so, and if it's helpful to think about, the discussion board is where all of the forums live. The forums are the individual kind of assignments or weeks if you're organizing it that way. And threads within the forums are the individual student posts. And then within a thread, someone can reply to an individual thread. All right, so if you do turn on grading for the discussion boards, everything would show up in needs grading. So you would go to needs grading. You can see here, I just have a bunch of assignments, but the discussion board would show up the same way. You can click next to the item name and grade the user, grade all users. And basically what it will do is it'll include all of the, include any original threads in that forum, as well as the replies for a student. So it basically puts everything together so that you can provide a grade and feedback at the same time. And the nice thing with that too is that if you're including the replies as part of the grade, you can actually give the student a full grade right then and there, and you don't have to separate out the original post and the replies. So then the only other thing to note too is that within the full grade center, if we scroll all the way to the right, you can see it did create a new column for me in my grade center, and will basically, obviously, once grades are starting to come in, will actually show up there. So that's kind of the main gist of discussion boards on Blackboard. You can feel free to reach out to the De Peters Family Center if you have any questions, but hopefully you have a good day.